Hey guys, in this video I want to go over Japan and Emperor Hirohito. So the things that we're going to do today is define empire and emperor, locate Japan and Germany on a map, and then identify Hirohito and Japan's rise to power. All right, so the first thing, I haven't done this yet, but one thing I need to do is kind of show you where these places are. You may know where some of these places are, so some of this might be a refresher, and I'm doing this on my TV, so hopefully this will work. Of course, we are right here, and Bowling Green, Kentucky is like right there, kind of right near what that star is. Other countries that are involved in World War II are going to be Germany, which is right here. Hopefully you remember that from World War One. France is going to be fighting World War II. This is England, who's going to be fighting World War II. And Japan. If you don't know where Japan is right here. It's a big island. Some other important places are China, which is this big country. All these countries are in Asia. And if you're curious, North Korea, sometime you may have heard of North Korea and South Korea before. North Korea and South Korea are right here. Kind of these two little, north is on top and south is on bottom, kind of these two countries that are hanging off China right here. So when we think of World War II, America is going to be fighting in this area right here in Europe. They're going to be fighting, and in Italy as well, and in North Africa as well. But also, they're going to be fighting a lot of battles in the islands of Japan, which are, through here. You can't see them because they're too small. But they're going to be fighting against the nation of Japan, which is right here. All right. So I just wanted to show you where those are. And I am going back to my desk so that. All right. So, with the rise of Japan. So this is the rise of Japan and Emperor Hirohito. And the book doesn't really talk about this, but I want to make sure that you know how the country of Japan becomes so powerful. And one of the reasons is Japan defeated Russia in what was called the Russo-Japanese War in 1905. Okay, and if you remember anything about Russia in World War One, you might remember that Russia was this big country and they had millions and millions of troops. And if you can remember, the nickname of the Russian army was called the Russian Steamroller. And they would just have millions of troops and they would just kind of steamroll over any enemy that they had. You might be thinking, how could Japan defeat a military like that? Well, for one, the Japanese had a pretty good navy, and their navy was actually responsible for leading the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. So Japan has a pretty good navy, for one thing. But because they were able to defeat Russia, that showed the world that Japan's military can compete with the big boys. They can compete with the really big world powers like Russia and the United States and Germany. Japan is on the rise back in 1905 and later. And of course, Japan had a great navy as well. They had these battleships, these aircraft carriers. They had a great air force, which is what bombed Pearl Harbor as well. Japan had a really, really good navy and air force, or at least it was getting a lot better. And Japan also defeated China in a war. If you remember from the map, China is just kind of right next door to Japan in 1895. And because of that, Japan takes a lot of control of Asia and places in Eastern Asia, like parts of China, another place called Manchuria. And so they showed the world they are a world power. They're one of the They're one of the big boys. They're one of the powers in the world that's great. Um, and because they were able to take control of different parts of Asia and different parts of Russia, I think, they are forming an empire. And an empire is where you kind of expand your countries, kind of expand your country or expand your influence over countries. Um, and so the ruler of an empire is called an emperor. And that's what China has, or Japan has. Japan has an empire. They have influence or control over different lands, like in China, the Philippines, I think other places. And they create an empire. It'd be like if America was an empire, we would have an empire maybe over Mexico or the Bahamas or South America. It's where we expand our country or our influence over other countries. That's an empire. All right. And after Japan won these wars and they kind of took over the lands, Japan didn't really, their government wasn't doing too hot, and it kind of led to the military taking over the power in the 1930s. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, and there's a lot of other stuff that goes into the reasons why Japan rises to power, but I'm just trying to kind of give you some of the most basic stuff. Economic hardships, like their economy wasn't doing that hot in the 1930s, and ever since the Great Depression hit in the 1930s, that affected other countries as well. It didn't just affect our countries, it hit other countries like Germany and Japan, because we traded with them, I believe. And so if our economy suffered, that's going to cause other countries' economies to be hurt a little bit as well. So Japan's economy was being hurt. Political scandal, some of their leaders in their government probably did bad things and they probably had to leave office, and which led to the assassination of government leaders. The military was taking over, and some of the government leaders ended up being killed, and that just led to the military taking over in Japan. And because Japan is becoming a world power and the military is taking over, they kind of had some stuff in common with Nazi Germany, and Japan actually became allies or friends with Nazi Germany. And so when United States fought Japan, who else they went to war with? Nazi Germany. President Roosevelt, when he wanted to declare a war, he wanted to declare a war on Japan. And because he did that, because Japan were friends with Nazi Germany, Germany then declared war on the United States. I believe that's how it went. I'm pretty sure that's how it went. All right. So Japan had a religion, just like Christianity is a religion. Japan had a religion as well, and it was at the center of their nation and their culture, just like Christianity is to ours. And their religion is called Shintoism. And again, there's a lot of stuff that goes into this. But Shintoism taught that the Japanese emperor is a god and a spiritual leader. And because the emperor, and remember, the emperor is also kind of like the leader of their government. He's also thought of kind of like a god and a spiritual leader. So you might think of a spiritual leader. Japan's emperor is kind of like, I don't think he went out in public all that much. I don't think he wasn't seen all that much because he's kind of a god. Gods don't really hang out with regular people. So the emperor is seen as a god and a spiritual leader, and that was taught in schools without question. Schools would have shrines to the emperor or to their god. You could imagine if schools had pictures of, Donald Trump, and maybe people would think that he's a god or whatever, and we would have shrines to him. But we don't have that in our culture for a number of reasons. But in Japan, they thought that their government leader, the emperor, was a god, and that was taught in schools, and they would have shrines to to the emperor. And it was also taught that the greatest honor in Shintoism is to sacrifice yourself for the country and emperor. Soldiers would willingly give their lives for their country and to serve their emperor, and that was thought as a great honor. American soldiers a lot think that way as well. If they can sacrifice themselves for the benefit and future of their country, they would be proud to do that because they love their country so much. All right. So Emperor Hirohito, he was the emperor, and that was his name. He wasn't the only kind of person that was in power. He had a group of military rulers or advisors that some say were probably the people who are really in charge. And some people think that Hirohito, he was just a puppet. If you think of a puppet is being controlled by a person. Well, some people think that Hirohito was being a puppet or controlled by those military rulers. And those military rulers they supported taking over countries and going to war with other countries. And some think Hirohito was just kind of a puppet to those military advisors. But we're not sure if he supported the war. I think we know that he did support the war, but we're just unsure of the extent of what he was supportive of. Right? So, and the last thing is Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941 brought U.S. to the war with Germany and Japan. So this covers the rise of Japan and how they become a world power and how that ultimately brings themselves into the war with the U.S. All right. So continue working on that chart. And then you'll have to turn it in tomorrow. See you later.